to building budgets in Student Manager. Chuck, we are excited to learn about this underutilized tool today.
Very good. Well, thanks, folks, for coming in. And again, my condolences to summer. Today, enjoy it. Today's the last day. So, but we're going to help you frolic into fall with the Budget Builder. How's that? So, what are we going to do? Well, first of all, I want to have a show of hands. So, I guess if I can see the attendees, raise your hand if you currently use Budget Builder. So let's just see how many of you are Budget Builder pros. We've got a call, we've got, yep, got a few, yeah, VCUs using it here. And Mount Cuba, great. Duncan, we're glad to have. All right, well, some of you don't, so that's what we're here about. So, and for those currently using it, we've got a couple new goodies to show you. So here's what we're going to do, kind of go through the process. This is going to be a fairly short compared to some of our sessions because it really is pretty simple to use. But we want to work you through the PowerPoint, and then we'll get into some live demos. And hopefully, if you've got questions, we can deal with them at the end. However, as always, if you do have a question in the middle that you're just not quite sure I made the point that should have been made, write a note to Sharon in the text box, and she will throw a rock over on my desk, and I'll slow down and take the question. So, what it is, obviously, it is to create course budgets. And again, this is forecasting. Budget Builder is something that your coordinators would do, your program planners, the folks that build the courses would use at the front end when they are determining fees for the class and what are the go, no-go numbers. And we'll talk about what that means. But basically, what's that minimum number you need to run the class, which typically is the go, no-go number. And then where is your break-even point? So we'll go through that. Whoa, slow down. And again, there is an actual live feed on the Budget Builder screen that will show you real data of what's going on with your actual status of a class. How do you get there? Well, you open the course record. It is a button on the course screen. Click the budget button, and voila, you are at the Budget Builder screen. This is one that already has some data in it. First thing you're going to do is to indicate the number of enrollments you think you're going to receive at a fee level. Now, it will, if you have multiple fees, it will show all of the fee levels in here. To be honest, the only fee that it really does the math on for your numbers is that first fee. So there's a certain amount of fudge you have to deal with it. If you really have a staff fee and 25% of your students or staff, you might want to actually take your registration fee and factor it down a bit. And if you've got some oddball situations with a lot of optional fees that are, or alternate fees that are way cheaper than your normal, we might want to have a discussion about that. But anyway, put in the fees. Note there is a import fees option. So you can import fees if you've already built them in the course screen, or, and we'll show this later, but if you actually start on a course, before you put in the fees, if you start in Budget Builder, put in a set of fees, when you're done and you say, you know, I'm happy with those fees, if you click Update Fees, that will automatically write these fees to the course screen. So anyway, there's some caveats on that. But anyway, there is this tool, and let me get my pointer tool for you guys. Update fees and import fees that allow you to get some shortcuts to and from the course screen behind you there. All right. And I got to get back to pointer mode. Here we go. So, and I've got to get rid of my painting. The next thing you do, number 2, is you put in your per person costs if you have any. And again, I don't know what course budgeting school you graduated from, but in my world, my alma mater says that per person expenses are items that you know you will deduct from the fee per nose that you have in the class. So things that are allocated per person, obviously food items. If you have kits or supplies or books that you're going to provide to the student as part of the fee, you would put those in as per person expenses. And what that will do then is down at the bottom here where you see base, and Sharon, am I moving around, just keeping up with you guys?
You are.
So these per person charges are then dropped down in this column across the bottom here and are deducted from your base fee because that is your net usable. You might charge $350, but if you have to give $95 before you even have them sit down in the chair, then your net is only $255 to pay for all of the other expenses. All right, back to the regular pointer mode. Come back to me, pointer. Here we go. So then there are a couple of options that you've got available. Number 1 is percentage for overhead charge. And if you wanted to, and if this was a course that you're sharing the profit with another campus department or a third-party organization. So the percentage overhead charge is calculated on a percentage of your expenses. It's not on a percentage of income, it is on a percentage of expenses. So again, depending on how you calculate overhead at your shop, you would use this. If you calculate overhead based on a percentage of the fee, then actually what I would suggest is that you would put in a per person expense. In other words, if it was a $300 course and you say the college gets a 50% overhead, you would actually need to put in a $200 per person expense that you say the boss woman is going to get $200 out of $400, so I really only have $200 to work with for my cost. So again, depending on how you might want to do your overhead. Now, percentage shared. This is a brand new feature. And what it allows you to do is to say, if I'm going to split the percentage 50-50 with an external group, whether they're on campus or an organization outside, what this will do is when you get to the profit or loss level in the calculations, it reduces it by whatever percent you're going to share with the other group. So that if a percent share is put in there, your profit or loss is actually going to represent what your unit will retain after you give away 50% of the profit to your partner. So that is the sharing the pie, if you would. And again, that is brand new. It is only, I think, 55 is when that came in, if I remember. Okay, now we're to the tough part, where you really need to try to crystal ball and decide, what are the expenses, the costs that it's going to take to run this program. And typically, your big items are going to be instruction cost and marketing costs. You might have some material costs for the course to run it if you do room rentals, if you have to, purchase some major expenses for audiovisual or equipment that you use in the course of the class, you would need to add those. So the big question here is, and then we'll move it on. And then to the right of your expense estimation, as you start to put in the expenses, if you use the major expense category for object codes, which I'm going to make a case for next month in the Pocket Ledger course, it'll actually organize your expenses by the category you use. Instruction, marketing, supplies, audiovisual, yada, yada. And it kind of gives you subtotals of how much you've got, or what these categories come out to. So actually it is. So $800 instruction, one $800 item. Marketing, $700, a $500, and a $200 item. We're actually adding it up. The subtotals is at the top. Not quite sure how Matthew does that, but that is your totals for those areas. I'm just curious. I'm going to have you drop your hands. Raise your hand if you're using major expense categories if you're using Pocket Ledger and expense categories. If you're not doing Pocket Ledger, you can leave your hands down. All right, we've got a couple. Good deal. Only a couple. All right. So, what if actuals? And this is where, when we get to the live in a minute, this is really going to see the benefit of this. But this is the place where you can actually experiment with the fees and guesstimates on enrollments, and you can analyze what that will do to your go, no go number and to your profit and loss, and to what the fee should be if you wanted to go at an assumption of a certain enrollment and a certain fee. So again, these are kind of planning scenario tools over here under What If Actual. Budget results. Okay, so as you are putting this data in the screen, it's actually starting to show up down here in this estimated column. You put in your enrollment number, your guesstimate. You put in how much of your costs are sunk costs versus program costs, and we're going to come back to that. Get me back to my highlighter here. Oh, I'm going to do spotlight. So again, sunk costs, program costs, what the base fee minus per person. So it tells you, here's your net usable, here's how much you're calculating for overhead, and that will give you a profit or loss based on this estimate. 12 people at 350 of 1124. And this is the sweet deal, I think. It tells you what your go, no go number needs to be and what your break even number will be. So again, that is to me, that is the benefit, the goal, the sweet spot of what that budget builder gives you. As you're working in the system, and you got 3 or 4 screens that you're playing with, most of the time it updates these counts on the bottom as you go. But I would, if you're in and out of the fees back and forth, I would hit the refresh button to make sure that you're updating these numbers down here at the bottom. All right, let's kind of circle back and talk about budget vocabulary. Base fee, and as we talked before, that is your first fee. It is the registration fee number 1 in your fee list. Sunk costs, estimated expenses marked at sunk program. Now, the net usable, base fee minus total per person, overhead, expenses, profit or loss, base fee, timed enrolled, plus all income, minus all expenses is your profit or loss. Go, no go calculation, it is based on the program expenses only, break even includes all expenses. So again, this is we'll come back. This is the big deal when we talk about making a estimated expense sunk or program. Sunk costs are literally gone when you incur them, and they would be incurred before the program run. And here's the big deal. If you cancel the course, you still have to pay, you've already paid those sunk costs. So again, marketing expenses, promotion, your catalog, any kind of deposits that are non-refundable, course development that you might have paid an instructor that if you've obligated that you will pay them their development costs whether the course goes or not, Those are all sunk. Program costs, on the other hand, are ones that only occur if you execute the program. And the big deal there is your instructor fees, because you typically make your arrangement with the instructor that if you cancel it X days ahead, you will not have to pay that instructor fee. And so that is the sunk cost, program cost definition that we pretty much run on. And again, on the go, no go, break even, go, no go is since sunk costs are already spent, you can't get them back if you cancel or not. Again, my school of budget building use was that if you can get enough student registration income to pay for the costs of running the program, which is usually it'd be covering that room for that night and paying for the instructor, you're not losing any more money than if you were to cancel. So any registration past the go, no go number begins to apply to your total expenses so that you're starting to bring back your pay for those sunk expenses. And then, of course, the break-even point is when all expenses are covered, and the student after that break-even point is where you actually generate additional revenue. Before we get into reports real quickly, and then go back to the live, Sharon, any questions bubbling up right now?
We have a question/suggestion, perhaps. When you have your go, no-go calculations made there, is there a reason that's not displayed on the main course screen where your minimum, maximum enrollment numbers are, et cetera, so it's right there for you?
It's a good question. I guess the reason, well, Matthew, that's a field on, is that one of the COBU fields in course, or is that calculated?
I can check.
Think about. I guess my answer to that is that there may be reasons why you want to either reduce that go, no go number from a political point of view. You've got a brand new course, you say you need 5 to go, no go, but because it's a new course, you'd actually settle for 4 people for your minimum. Or you might have a go, no go of 5, but the instructor might say, I need 7 people before it's worth my time. I have a big enough ego. If I can't get 7 students in the class, I'm not going to do it. So the idea of changing that minimum number is really a program manager's call. Presumably they're going to use that number. Now, the question for Matthew, and it would be the idea that when we have the, and let me bring manager up here and get a live screen up to look at. If I can type in my password. Cancel, no, look up the course.
It looks like those are calculated on the budget screen.
But the idea would be that when you've got the go, no go number, would be a question of whether or not when you close or save the screen, that we have a checkbox here that says paste into manager, so that when you calculate this and you do OK close, it would write that number rounded up, of course, to a whole digit into the minimum number. So we can kick that around. Right now. Come again, Matthew.
That wasn't me, but go back to the course screen. You've got your user-defined label field there. I'm sure
right
we
here
put some sort of calculation into that instead of.
Yeah, I guess the issue, and I guess one of the questions, and this is kind of for the true believers, the ones who are going to church and eating their vitamins and all, is that if they use Budget Builder, ahead of time to calculate this go, no go, whether we should have a preference here that says, you know, update the minimum, you know, or overwrite the course minimum with this figure, and if once you do OK close, it'll just paste that into the go, no go. So anyway, let's cogitate on
an interesting suggestion. Yeah, we have another question here.
Go ahead.
Does the profit loss block in that yellow highlighted estimate block take into account the profit share if it's been entered?
Let's try that. Right now, I have no profit share on this particular course. So if I'm going to say I want a 50%, or I'm dealing with Ashley from VCU, and she was a shrewd operator and is getting 50% of this. When I put in 50%, look what happened to my profit or loss. That immediately is discounted by half, because right now, because I put in this amount, it has reduced the profit that I'm going to see by 50%. If I change that to 10%, I should see something, well, there's 1044, I think it was 11 something was the amount of the shares. So yes, that does reflect the profit or loss here. I am not sure that it affects this actual down at the bottom here, Matthew. Let's put this as 0 and tab out. It does. So, well, there's $16. I go back to 50% again. Boom, it's down to $8. So yes, it is live and going on as you put in the data and you change that percentage. Other questions for right now? Good questions. We good for now?
At this moment.
Matthew, you have any other comments you want to make right now before we look at reports real quick?
Can I give you an extension of that? She says she sees that it's live, but does it do the same thing in your testing area, that go, no go, yellow block on the other screen? So go to the what if theory.
Okay, so here is our profit or loss number at 50%. So let's go back to fee setup, change this to 0, and go to what if actuals. And it does not, Matthew, it does not appear to change the profit or loss. I guess this is program profit or loss before sharing. And I'm thinking you may want to leave that one alone. This has some funky calculations in. So yeah, the point would be, if you are doing profit sharing, 50% here. Oops, I wanted 50. If you're doing profit sharing, this reflects automatically what if actuals is the gross profit, gross net profit, without taking into account your 50% share. Because this is all based on, so we're saying if we had 10 enrolled at a fee of $350, your go, no go is 4270. Now, if you don't change the enrollment if you don't change the fee and you don't change the expense, your go, no go numbers aren't going to change. The only time your go, no go numbers are going to change if you change the fee you're going to charge or you change the expenses. What will happen, of course, is profit or loss will begin to go up or down based on enrollment and a combination of the fee. So did we kind of get through that, the idea that in the profit or loss, the what if, it does not reflect percentage share? And Matthew, I suppose if you wanted to put a parens in here, note does not reflect share amounts, if you wanted to clarify. But yeah, that is based on bona fide pre-share numbers. Good clarification there. Anything else right now?
And that's all we have right now.
All right. So let's jump back to the PowerPoint and take a look at budget reports. We got reports, quick reports button, allow you to run for the particular course, budget proposal, budget versus actual details, budget versus actual summary. And so again, these are some models of reports. one thing to note, again, I always say this, if you have a student manager database that dates back several years and you've never run budgets before, your budget report templates are probably kind of out of date. And so if you're wanting to get into budgeting and you haven't done it before, I would encourage you to get with your tech and have them send you a new set of budget reports and actually delete out your old ones. So anyway, here's an example of a budget proposal. This is an example of a budgeted versus actual. Whoa, I'm slipping around. There we go, budgeted versus actual. And then there are reports at the mass level. That's at the course level. There is a reporting area under the master reports level under Pocket Ledger that gives you some budget reports. So, all right, I'm going to jump back to the Live Manager and let's do a couple of fresh starts here for budgeting here. So let me find a course here, Extend Student Manager with ACEware. All right, so in this case, I already have a fee identified. We're going to go into Budget Builder as if we were starting a new one. So I'm going to import the fees. I'm going to say I'm going to just guesstimate 8 people. And again, really the only place where that 8 comes into account is when you're over here on the what if actual side, and it uses that 8 default to calculate the numbers when you're doing that first estimate of fees. So we're going to add per person expenses. We're going to have a break, and it's $5, and there's going to be one of them. And let's add a supply kit. And again, these are just open text. There is no drop down on a kid, not a kit. Supply, maybe you have a kid that provides supplies for everybody. $15. And we need one of those. All right, so we now have, I'm going to tab out of that, $20 in supplies. Now we go over to fees. So we're going to add an expense, instructional costs, and this is that major category, major expense category. I'm going to ask another question here, so drop your hands. How many of you use Pocket Ledger? Raise your hand if you use Pocket Ledger. Good. We've got a few. All right, those folks that use Pocket Ledger, all right, I'm going to drop the hands. Hang on. How many of you have set up major categories of expenses, you know, where you cluster all your marketing together and all your supplies together? Raise your hand if you use the major expense categories. All right, so yeah, good. All right. We'll talk about that next week, but basically what you've got when you're doing budget codes is that you can group your object codes for expenses into major categories. All right, so we're going to have a $500 honorarium for this person, and it's an expense. Now, this actually, in your estimated expenses, adding an expense which is a income, think of it as a negative expense. If you have grant funders who underwrite the costs of a course, say Red Cross gives you $50 for every life-saving class or CPR class you offer. They give you $50 a class. You could actually add in a category that is an income of $50, and that is debited against, it reduces your expenses by the amount that you're going to call it. Okay, the final big question for this expense now is, this is instruction. Do we have this as a program expense or a sunk expense? Well, the answer is program, because if we cancel this class, we can eliminate the expense. So we're going to add another one, and we're going to say this is going to be marketing, printing, and it's a share of the catalog, $150. it's an expense. Now again, because this is marketing, it was done ahead of time, the printer won't give us a refund if we cancel the class. It is a sunk expense. And these descriptions, again, on the right are just descriptive descriptions. So you're able to call it whatever you want. And you go on and about what you're doing here. We could add more marketing expense. We've got some mailing costs here. Mailing costs of $50 per class. And that is, again, also sunk expense. So as we're doing that now, what you're looking at, if you look down at the bottom here again, I'll get my little highlighter here, you'll see that it's beginning to fill in the numbers here for what this course is going to generate for us at these fees and what our go, no go break even is. Now, in this case, because our marketing cost is fairly small, we really, if we had, well, let's say in one registration, 155 bucks, will pretty much come close. Well, let's do a refresh on. There it is, 4.5. 1.5 registrations would get us from go no go to break even. Now again, all right. So that is your process of adding expenses, putting in fees for building out this class. Any questions on this piece so far?
Could you go back, Chuck, to the per person charge screen? There you go. Talk a little bit about, in that area, the number sign you see up there. Right now they have one break at $5. Right. So this number sign you see is talking about the number of breaks or the number of supply kits that would be needed, yes? So if you type in 2, it'd be 2 breaks that they're going to have.
Right. So if this was an all-day seminar, and the answer is right, that is the number of expenses, that $5 that we're going to have. So if you had an all-day program and you did a morning and afternoon break, that really should be 2. Now watch the total. It will extend the total, just like when you're putting in expenses as optional additional expenses in the registration screen. You could say, I want 2 extra lunches at $15, and that will extend the grand amount to 30. So yes, this is the amount. So breaks, meals, maybe you have a 2-day conference, you're going to have 2 lunches. Well, 2 lunches at $15 extends out to 30. So yes, that is what that pound sign is the quantity. Now again, if you put in a 0 here, I believe it will let you record this as a optional fee, but if you don't put in an amount, it says, well, you must be just telling me this for my looks, because you're not actually putting in a dollar amount there. But yeah, we would want to do that so that we have that number updated. All right, thank you. Good point on that. Now, let's go to the what if actuals, because this is, another thing, budget note. This is again something that is shared, but if you've got some note about this particular budget, and say it was a shared, you're doing a 25% or 20% share. Now watch the $500 down in the, get my 20%. So now it is $400 as the profit. It was $500, but I'm going to do a share. You might want to put, 20% share with VCU. And again, Ashley would never settle for 20%, but we'll just say that for giggles and grins. So the idea is that you can write a note about that budget if that would be helpful for somebody else looking at it. What if actuals? So enrolled. So if we were, now that is given us enrolled as 8. Let's get into that. It didn't give me my numbers. It's going to have 8 enrollments. I don't know why, Matthew, it dropped out 175. Okay, now we're back into the ball game. 8 people, 175, go, no, go 3.3. That's the same. Profit or loss, same. That's a gross amount, and this is showing less than 20%. Now, what this does show you is calculated fee. Now, if you're playing the old market curve, supply versus cost versus demand, you say, well, you know what? I have the ability to handle an unlimited number of students in this class. I don't have to worry about lab or space. And if I can actually charge as little, keep that under 120 bucks, I think I could really jack up my enrollment numbers and still make my budget. So let's say if I wanted to make this fee at 112, I'd still be able to make the budget. So that is a way for you to actually bring this back down. The other way of looking at this is you play with the fee and with the dollar amount. You say, well, I'm going to put in this fee at 129. So you see at 129, it still would give me a profit. And I say, well, I think I can actually double my enrollments. Now, and what this lets you do is to get a real quick idea of if you, and you all know it's butts in seats. If you can bring the bodies in, again, barring charging some ridiculous fee per class, if you can bring the butts in seats, you're going to start generating some income on your programs. So if we say, well, I really think by dropping the fee, I can double my enrollment. I was making $500 on the old mode. If I do that, even with a drop fee, I think I can get more money. And there is your art, my friends. That's the art. I don't know how much science it is. Your art of budget building. So questions about the what if, because that's really, I think, a great tool as you're trying to guesstimate how to get into a course. Sharon, anything popping up here?
I'm not seeing any questions, but I know having the ability to just play with those numbers back and forth is a very good tool to have.
One of the things to note, you'll note now I put in this fee of 129, and in my go, no go break even, this will change because I have changed the fee so that calculation of go, no go and break even is going to change because I am getting less revenue on obviously a 129 course. My net is less than if I were to be charging that 175. And again, this is a kind of a play area. As I remember, it does not, I'm trying to think, it does not get saved. It always will revert back to the numbers that you've got on the main fee here. So,
Chuck, can you talk a little bit about what the difference is between a calculated fee that you see where you on the What If Actuals tab? What is the difference between your calculated fee and your fee? Mm-hmm.
And the quote stated fee. The idea of the calculated fee, and I think this hover note says it, if you wanted to do break even, because right now, based on our estimate, at 8 people, we would actually generate a profit of $500. If you had a mission, anyone normally is going to love that, but if your mission was to maximize the number of students and not lose money, but just try to break even, you said, well, you know what? I could actually, even at 8 people, I can drop that fee down to this 112 and I will break even. So it is the amount that expenses being the same, enrollment estimate being the same, that is the minimum course fee you need to break even. So if we were to say 112.5, we would have no profit, we would have no loss, and that is the break even, if you would, fee based on our estimation expenses right now. And again, I think the idea behind that is for if you've got questions about what you what you can charge for a course in your environment, and you say, well, golly, maybe my 175 is a bit pricey for my environment. I'll drop it to 149. And so let's see what happens if we made this as 149. And again, we're not changing the expenses here, and we're not changing the number of enrolled estimate. So the calculated fee stays the same. But when I drop the fee here, of course, my profit dropped from $500 to $292. But I have to say that's still not bad if that was real numbers in terms of generating some profit. Okay, other kind of questions. Otherwise, Matthew, can you think of anything else? I think we've really kind of beat on this. Overhead, let's kind of go to overhead. We've got percent share. I'm going to zero that out, and we'll see our profit go back to 500. If we right now our expenses are about $700. So if we were to say we wanted a 50% overhead charge, that goes to the boss. What we're going to do is that profit or loss is going to drop by a certain amount, because we're now taking out $350 worth of overhead. We're basically calculating in an overhead amount based on 50% of our estimated expenses. So that, again, if you're now that doesn't necessarily change the break even. No, it does change the break even. Go no go, it does not include overhead. Break even does. So it's kind of like you figure you want to minimize your dollar out of pocket exposure, and you can do that with break even with the go no go. Break even means that you're beginning to cover program costs, and you're beginning to get some money back to pay the boss people who are asking you to cough up extra money, being a serf in this kingdom, to the king, to your administrators, to the institution. So again, it's going to change. Your break-even amount is going to go up when you put in the expense. I'm going to make that back to 0, tab out, and bada boom, our break-even is down, because now we're not required to send taxes up to the king. I think I beat this to death. Sharon, how are we doing?
I think you're doing fine. I'm not seeing any other questions right now.
Very good. Well, again, next, Matthew, did we good? Anything you'd want to throw in there?
I'm good.
Again, next month, we're going to kind of follow the show me the money mode with the pocket ledger. And there we're going to talk more about the major minor expense categories and how you can use those in the system. Again, as usual, if you have questions about some of these elements, we have a webinar. We have multiple webinars in the webinar archive, budget building, financial forensic, pocket ledger. We'll have, of course, an updated pocket ledger module. So again, got resources there. We have your online help guide. So again, you've got help to learn more about this particular topic. So again, thanks to Cheryl for putting together a nice set of slides, and Sharon for being, again, the hostess with the mostest. So Matthew, thanks again for the new goodies. And if you have questions, shoot us an email. Otherwise, we'll see you first of the month for the new software release, and on the 19th for Pocket Ledger. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your last summer. Bye-bye.